So anyway, there are really three things that I want to do today. I want to shape a better understanding of the importance of marketing to your success. I want to create clarity around your role as the Chief Marketing Officer for your business. And if you remember what I was talking about earlier and showing you all the different ways that I got involved in the community, that was my role as Chief Marketing Officer for this agency, to be able to look at the steps that I could take to build my reputation and to build a pipeline of people who were interested eventually in transacting with us. So it's really important that each of you start to think of yourself as the Chief Marketing Officer. And then I want to offer some insights into steps you can take to be successful on this journey. And I guess if you walk away from this presentation with anything other than I don't know how to use technology, let it be that you have to move strategically, not tactically, in order to win the race that's set out for you. And for some of you, it may be a sprint. For others, it may be more like a marathon. But when you look at the slide that I showed you of all the different services that we provide, you see that there are infinite possibilities, but the thing you have to remember is that your resources are finite and you can't do all of the things, and you don't want to get caught up with the next shiny object in terms of marketing. Can you go ahead to the next slide? So what I really want to say in this one, and this is telling you nothing, 70% of technology startups fail. That's not news for you. It certainly is true for all startups. It was true for me too. And so you know the hill that you have to climb, and that's what you already accept when you get into the positions that you're in, and there are just exciting opportunities about it. But the 2 M's are really the primary reasons that we can see that, tech startup companies fail. One, the market opportunity isn't big enough. And I wonder, when I was thinking about presenting to you guys, if the market opportunity isn't big enough, or if you just haven't told a good enough story to make people see that the market opportunity is big enough, or that you run out of money. And those two kind of were equally divided. So, despite the odds, what I'm here to help you make sure is that your targets, whether you're going after investors, customers, potential partners, that they are able to see and to understand the market opportunities in each of your businesses, and to help you to do that as cost effectively as you possibly can. Next slide. So what is it that investors care about? I told you I spend a lot of time in investor relations, and I think this is really true if you're looking at commercializing your product, or you're going after a company that may be able to leverage your technologies as a strategic investment inside of theirs. But what they care about really is, the point of the game is to win it. And I've been in these conversations, I'm in them all the time, as a lot of the companies that I work with are owned by private equity firms. It's really about the numbers. It's about EBITDA, it's about multiples, and it's primarily driven by growth. And in looking at the roster of companies that are participating in this conversation, a lot of you are involved in healthcare technologies, you may be educational software, energy, environmental preservation kinds of technologies. When you get into industries that are projected to grow, the multiples are higher. There's a multiple that you get just by being in healthcare that you don't get by being in manufacturing. And the competition is really intense. And so, we can't get caught up and think that what you're doing is really for the good of mankind. I think that that's wonderful. Cancer therapies, educational software, climate-saving technologies. But these decisions are going to be by measures that they can monetize. The valuations of the market opportunity, the growth potential, and the gap that you fit into their portfolio or product offering. And this doesn't make them bad, it just makes them investors. And when you look at investors, they're smart, they're financially savvy business people, and they have obligations to their own investors and to people who have put the dollars into their funds. So let's go to the next slide. So there are steps that you can take, and Brian, this is a build, so the first thing that you're gonna see, and then I'll tell you when to go on, but you have to make sure about your value proposition. You have to get your product into customers' hands, and you have to identify the real problems that your product solves. What are the customer pain points? And you have to understand them from their perspective, not yours. And so you have to not only get outside of yourself, but you have to get outside of your comfort zone and go to the outside and look at what it is that they see when they look at your company. I always tell people a real simple analogy is you can't see the house from inside the house. You just can't possibly see it. You can look out the windows, but you can't see the house. In order to be able to see the house, you have to get out of the house. You have to walk across the street, and then you can see the house. So this is kind of that same principle. You have to get out there, and you have to really understand what it is that your customers care most about. Go to the next one, please. This next one is really tell your story and tell it well. I would say that I am kind of a master storyteller. I always try to tell good stories. And you have to make sure that you're telling a story that's meaningful. The story has to be personal. You really have to, I always tell people, only your mother, maybe your girlfriend, maybe your significant other, maybe your boyfriend, they might think you're special, but nobody else really does. So you have to really tell me, what is it that you can do for me? Don't tell me what it is that you're going to do. Tell me what you're going to do for me in the context of making sure that this is what I care about. And then this last bullet here under this point, the more you have to explain, the less I listen. So if it takes you a long time to walk through your value proposition, and the longer it takes you, the less likely I am to care about it or to retain any of it. So make sure you're telling your story really well. The next one, you are the CMO of your company. You're the Chief Marketing Officer, you're the Chief Communication Officer, and what I'm saying is you really need to embrace that. You yourself, I mean, you look at the technologies you're developing as critical, you might be your company's your idea's single greatest advantage. So one of the things Forbes magazine, and if anybody's writing anything down, Forbes is, a very strong business publication, straight up business publication. It's respected by many CEOs and business leaders and decision makers. They focus a lot of their editorial content. They have things that are focused just for marketers. And so you might want to follow them and get familiar with them and look at them as a source of really valuable information. But in getting ready to talk with you, I was reading an article in Forbes, and one of the things that they basically said was this first point, that for most tech-savvy technology companies and early-stage technology companies like yours, development and operations consume almost all of your budget and mind share, and that's really a mistake. Don't let that happen. Immerse yourself in your industry, understand the trends, go beyond the features and benefits communications of your products, and become what I call one of us. When you saw in my background the boards that I've sat on, the awards that I have received, this was really conscientious, maybe selfishly altruistic. I knew that I was going to need to position myself as a business leader in this community. I've done that in particular some industry sectors as well, where I am recognized as one of them. And that's what you need to be able to do. That way you can build relationships with people who have access, and your fan base is much more important at a certain point in time, at this time in your development, than your customer base. So what does that mean? Show up at conferences, invest yourself in the community, be active on social media, target influencers, write guest posts, answer an interesting question, comment on posts from key opinion leaders. But my advice to you is to be able to show up and do those things. And I don't want to say that it doesn't cost money. Those things may not cost a lot of money, but your most valuable asset is your time. And I recognize that it costs you your time, but I think it would be a really important investment for you to make. Go on to the next one, please. Get good at SEO. You know, search engine optimization and optimizing your website. I'm just, kind of making the assumption here everybody's going to has a website, but optimizing your search is really important. Even for very established brands and companies, organic leads always account for the greatest number of visits to websites. You might think that that happens from digital advertising and Google search, but really SEO is really the key driver of interest in a company. Take the time to understand keywords and rankings. There are a lot of free tools that'll help you to do that. Pay attention to long tail keywords because they're not as competitive. You can show up really higher in searches. They might not have the traffic, but anybody who's looking for or paying attention to a long tail keyword is really interested. This next one, this have valuable content in order to be able to get on Google's radar. You really do need to pay attention to the content, the quality content, and how you're organizing that content on your website in order to really be effective as it relates to search. But that's a really, really important thing, and Google's getting increasingly strict. Over the years, it's changed and it continues to change in terms of what they think is valuable content. And then this last one, you want to create strong CTAs on your website. If you need more information, if I can talk to you, you want to do that. But the mistake I think that people make is by trying to be too promotional, too salesy. In many ways, your goal is to really attract interest and build your reputation as much as it is to drive any type of transactional sale. Next point. It's really going to be important to invest strategically and prudently. So you can really overinvest in marketing. That's hard to say, for somebody like me who's a marketer, but I understand very, very personally the finiteness of money. And you really can't invest too much upfront or you won't have the money that you need in order to invest in the long haul. So, use customer success as a platform for growth. Don't overinvest. If you have customers who or fans, I guess I'll say, allies and advocates, you can use them, to leverage what it is that you're doing, produce testimonials, see if you can build brand loyalists, but make sure that you're successful with a small number before you try to go to something that you can't scale. Have a plan and work the plan and then revisit the plan. I think it's very important for you to create a simple plan. That's going to start with, here are my goals. Here are the most important audiences to my success. Here's the strategies I'm going to use to reach them. And here are the tactics that I'm going to take. But try not to make it too complicated. You have to recognize that this is a journey and that you have to build trust in every step of the way. For selling, there are really 4 stages of the sales journey. People have to be aware of you, and it just is making common sense, but people have to be aware of you before they can be interested. They have to be interested before you really become part of the consideration set. And you have to be part of the consideration set before anybody is going to make the decision to either purchase your technologies, your products, or your services, or to invest in them. So, and along every step of that 4-phase journey, it's really critical that you build trust and confidence. And there are different ways and different things that you can do in order to be able to do that. So the other thing that's here, use simple tools for data. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Low-cost fundamentals, public relations, get in front of the press, Decide who the people are who are reporting on your particular industry sector or your technology. Figure out if there's an angle or a way that you can fit into what they're reporting about, and then reach out to them. I do a lot of media relations, and at first getting in front of the press was really intimidating to me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to sell my story idea. What if they say no? But you have to ask yourself, what if they say yes? And what if you look at yourself and say, I'm really going to help a reporter out. I'm not trying to sell my story. I'm trying to help them to report on this industry sector. I'm trying to give them information, statistical evidence, data, infographics that will enable them to be able to do their job of sharing that information with their constituents more easily. So really think about yourself as an offer of help as you look at reaching out to the press. Social media is really important. And so you really can be active on social media, not just posting your stuff, using hashtags, commenting on what other people are writing and what other people are saying. The thing, though, that you have to remember in social is there's kind of a rule of thumb. Try to sell me on what you're doing, like 1 out of every 3 or 4 posts that you have. Make sure you're posting things that are educational and that are insightful and that are helpful and thought-provoking, and then comment on what other people are doing there. Don't try to use social media to too heavily sell an audience. And then there are simple tools for data and performance management. You know, this is really an important thing, but you can find that there are some free tools that you can use to really set up data and performance management. You know, Google Analytics, MailChimp, basic CRM capabilities, free tools like HubSpot is going to provide. You know, you are not at a point where you need a marketing automation to invest in a marketing automation platform that's going to aggregate data and do all sorts of different things. You just really need to capture data, and so that you can decide how you're going to do more of what people like and less of what isn't working. And I do think it's important for you to be building a database, whether that's with people who are fans, people who are potentially interested, and then communicate with emails on an ongoing basis with those particular audience. But focus on the things that you can afford to do and do those things really well. And don't get caught up in the next shiny marketing technology buzzword. There's way too many of them for you to go down that rabbit hole. And then the next one, Brian, you know, cash rules, but don't overlook content. And I take the cash rules one very seriously, because having been an entrepreneur myself, I've known what it's like to have my house, and all of my personal assets, you know, up as collateral against a loan, and wondering if I really goof this up, am I going to have money to send my kids to college? You know, it become real personal decisions for entrepreneurs when they decide that they need to find lending, when they need to find people that will lend them money, even if people will. So I understand that cash rules, and you really have to be respectful of that, but don't overlook content. You can produce really good content with the information that you probably already have. You know, you can use data to prove what you're doing is worthwhile. And again, I'm pushing the chips on the words worthwhile, not just that you've got data to show us what it is you're doing and that it works, but to show us the data to prove that what you're doing is important. That's really the thing. Make it matter. Create a blog. You can easily create a blog, but if you do, you have to make sure that it's meaningful, that it has good content, that it has relevant information, and that it's interesting to your targets. Because people can can unsubscribe and people can quit you very, very easily in today's world. And because so many things happen online, half of you could have given up on me 30 minutes ago and be, working on whatever it is that you think is a more important utilization of your time. But you have to make sure that what you're doing is valuable and people value it. So, mix it up. Use infographics. There are so many free tools to create good infographics. Suggest some surveys. Ask people to answer just these 3 questions. I'm a big one to say God only gave you 5 fingers, so don't ever do anything that is greater than what I can count on one hand. But you can do some really short surveys. You can show some statistics that might be kind of intriguing or might get people to stop and think about what it is you're saying. You can create short video clips from your phone. I have had some bigger clients who they do get in seriously. They're using their phone to do video clips of 30-second video clips, in an office closet to control the sound, and then they're utilizing those on their social platforms. Video is a really great tool. It needs to be done well, but it doesn't have to be, production quality video. So just don't limit yourself, whether it's podcast, just mix it up. And then the last thing is whatever you decide to do, you really need to commit to it. They say it takes like 9 attempts before someone may be really interested in what it is that you have to say, and most people are going to give up after 4 attempts. But you have to, if you're going to do a blog, you have to make sure that you're doing it with some level of consistency. If you're going to do communications to a database, you can't do communications to a database and then 6 months later and say, oh, I'm following up on my last communication, because that's when you got around to it. You really need to put a plan together, work the plan, and commit to making sure that you're doing the things that you say you do. Next slide, Brian. So the one thing that I really want to emphasize in concluding is that there is no silver bullet. Now, we might think that that's a bad news, but it really isn't, because there's a silver lining in that. You're not going to lose the game because you're unable to invest in the next new shiny marketing technology. You're going to win the game because you understand the value of marketing. You're investing your passion, your smarts, and your time to market your company. And if you do that, you can lay down the tenets of a successful marketing program that's simple and that's affordable, and effective in building your reputation. Interestingly, your brand is really your capitalized reputation. You can monetize your reputation as one of your greatest assets. It's actually one of the top 10 factors that drive enterprise value, is your reputation or your capitalized brand. So that's it. I'm kind of at my limit here. I apologize for all the trouble and had to go very quickly, but I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything, Brian, or if there's any time for that.
Yeah, if we can take a question or two, and if there are more beyond that, then maybe Mary, I can collect them and communicate with you and try and get some answers to people.
Yeah, and if people really do have a lot of questions, Brian, and if you would want me to, to join you at another time, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, all right, great. Does anybody have maybe just one question now? Okay, if not, then
I'll ask a question, and that's
sure.
About storytelling. So, how do you begin to test, or how do you begin to build the process of telling a story that might resonate with others, especially when you're in a technical space and you may be used to, or your colleagues may be used to the jargon, but others may not?
Yeah, I think that, and to me, people ask me what do I do first? What's the most important thing for me? And I always tell them to have a story worth listening to. If you don't have a good story and it's not one that's worth listening to, then it really doesn't matter what else what it is that you do or what it is that you say. To me, I think the first step in that is to really make sure that the value proposition that you have is really something that your customers are really going to value. Again, how do you really understand the problem that your technology solves and why solving that problem is a big enough and important enough problem? So to me, you have to understand the pain points of your target audiences, of eventually, I think, the customers for your technology, and how they talk about the problems that your product solves. So I think the first thing you need to do is get out there and talk to some of the customers, some of the people who may ultimately be the users of your technology, and let them help you shape your story. See what it is that they have to say and what it is that they care about. They may have some really very different things to say than you do. And it has to be plain speak. It can't be locked up in the technological jargon.
Okay, thank you, Mary, very much. I'm sorry that we couldn't get the technology figured out a little quicker, but thank you very much for this great presentation, and yeah, I'm sure very helpful to our teams, and we'll maybe I'll be back in touch with some further questions and see if we can do something else.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck and best wishes to everyone on this call. Like I said, the success of initiatives like yours is really important to all of us. So best wishes, and please do reach out if you have additional questions.
Sounds good.